I knew my life was about to change the moment I touched that leather folder, because it felt like truth. And trouble. The leather folder sat in front of me, heavy as a heartbeat. I could almost feel it pulsing through the table, like it knew more about me than I knew about myself. I remember staring at it for a long moment, afraid to open it, afraid to close it, afraid to even breathe. My name was written on the front in Grandma's handwriting. Clean. Sharp. Certain. I had no idea that this folder was about to break my family in half. I had no idea it was about to expose lies older than my childhood. I had no idea that opening it meant stepping into a storm I could never step back out of. I was only turning 21 that morning. I still felt young. I still felt like someone learning life, not someone inheriting it. But life does not wait for you to be ready. Sometimes it pushes you forward even when your hands are shaking. When I finally opened the folder, my breath caught. Inside were the deeds. My grandmother's 21st birthday gift to me. A $50 million hotel. A whole hotel. My name was printed across the top of the ownership documents. My name. Not Grandma's. Not my mother's. Mine. For a moment, the world got quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Heavy quiet. The kind that sits on your chest and reminds you that power is never simple. The kind that whispers that someone, somewhere, is about to be angry. I felt pride for 1 second. Before everything else collapsed. Because before I could even breathe it in, the front door opened. I heard the sharp click of heels. I smelled strong perfume. I felt a familiar coldness fill the house. My mother walked in, her new husband right behind her. They did not knock. They did not call. They arrived like they owned the place. My mother's smile was stiff and polished, the same smile she used when cameras were on her. "We should manage it together as a family," she said, as if the hotel was a cute little project we all built together. She said the words like she was being generous. Like she was offering me a blessing. But her eyes told the truth. She wanted control. She always had. When I told her, absolutely not. "I'm the owner now," everything inside her snapped. Her smile vanished. Her jaw tightened. Her voice turned into a blade. "Then pack your bags and leave this house." She wanted to scare me. She wanted to reclaim the power she believed was still hers. But I did not argue. And I did not move. Because I knew something she didn't know. That night wasn't really about her demands. It was about Grandma's next move, one that would end their whole little performance for good. When people look at me now, they see the hotel. They see the glass lobby. They see the marble floors shining like they are proud of themselves. They see my name etched in gold above the entrance. They see the success. But they don't see the noise that used to live in this family. They don't see how hard someone had to fight just to be heard. They don't see how much love had to bleed just to build the strength we stand on now. My grandmother, Sharon Bennett, built everything we had from a single roadside motel in Vermont. She was 21 back then, my age now. Everyone called her foolish. Everyone said she was dreaming too big. Everyone expected her to fail. But she did not fail. She turned doubt into brick. She turned mockery into revenue. She turned a broken little motel into a chain of landmarks. By the time I was born, the Bennett collection had become a name people whispered with envy. You could hear our family name in airports, on travel magazines, on business panels, everywhere. My mother, Brenda, inherited none of Grandma's patience. She inherited only the pride. The show. The hunger for attention. To her, success wasn't about building anything, it was about being seen standing next to things someone else built. She loved camera flashes more than blueprints. She loved applause more than quiet progress. She wanted power without sacrifice. She wanted the crown without the kingdom. She wanted everything Grandma earned but none of the responsibility that came with it. My father, Mark, was the opposite of her. Calm. Steady. Honest. He was the one who kept the business stable when my mom's ideas ran wild. He was the one who handled operations for years. He was the reason the hotels didn't fall apart under flashy decisions and reckless spending. But my mother never loved calm. She loved attention. And nothing about Dad reflected the spotlight she craved. When I was 16, I watched that balance collapse in real time. I still remember the night Dad left. His suitcase was sitting by the door. His eyes looked tired in a way that comes from loving someone who does not love you back in a safe way. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He just said, "I can't stay where love has become performance." Then he left. Quietly. Like someone walking away from a burning building. The silence that followed him out the door was not normal silence. It was the kind that fills every corner of a house and never leaves. My mother remarried quickly. Too quickly. She married Scott Miller, a smooth-talking business consultant who carried himself like success but had nothing real behind him. He spoke in words like synergy and global expansion. He loved big ideas and small work. He looked shiny from far away but hollow up close. He was everything my mother thought success looked like. Loud. Flashy. Empty. Not long after they married, my mother sent me to live with Grandma, claiming it was for stability. But I knew better. I was just one less witness. Life with Grandma was quiet but never dull. Her home smelled like cedar and old paper. Mornings began with the sound of her typewriter keys tapping out new ideas. She treated me not as a child but as an apprentice. She let me sit in on meetings. She taught me about land value, market shifts, architectural flow, and legacy. Real legacy. Not the social media type my mother worshipped. Legacy that required discipline, risk, and courage. She told me that every building has a story. She said walls remember who built them and why. Back then, I didn't understand she was also talking about people. Years passed. My mother's calls grew shorter, sharper, emptier. "You should visit," she would say. "Scott wants to talk about the European market." But I always had exams or projects or reasons not to return to her world. She didn't want me. She wanted access. Access to what I represented. To what Grandma trusted me with. Then my 21st birthday came. That morning, Grandma asked me to sit at her desk. She pushed the leather folder toward me. Heavy. Unfamiliar. Life-shaping. She said, "This is your inheritance. But it is also your test." I didn't know what she meant. Not then. But I would find out soon. Dinner that night felt warm. Safe. Grandma cooked roasted lamb. The candles flickered softly across the long oak table. For a moment, everything in life felt steady. Calm. Predictable. I thought maybe this birthday would be simple. But life rarely gives you warnings when it shifts. The doorbell rang, a small sound that changed everything. I opened the door, and the cold night air swept in before I saw them. My mother. Dressed in a cream coat. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. A smile too glossy, too stretched, too familiar with lies. Behind her stood Scott, wearing the same smug confidence he always wore. He held a gift bag, but it wasn't a gift. It was an expectation, wrapped in ribbon. They walked in without waiting to be invited. They looked around Grandma's home like hunters searching for prey. And then they saw it, the folder. My inheritance. They tried to mask their hunger, but greed never hides well. $50 million, my mother said with a smile that could cut glass. How wonderful. Her tone was coated in sweetness, but it dripped with poison. She spoke as if the number mattered more than the years of work behind it. I tried to stay calm. "It's not about the number," I said. Grandma wanted me to continue what she started. Mom laughed lightly. A laugh that meant nothing honest. Of course, sweetheart. But running a business that size isn't for children. That word, children, burned. Scott leaned forward. Let us manage it together as a family, he said, like a used car salesman offering a broken engine. It wasn't a request. It was a warning dressed as help. But Grandma stepped in, her voice cutting clean through the lie. A proposal for something that isn't yours, she said. Things escalated fast. Faster than I could process. Grandma exposed their past financial schemes with cold precision. My mother's face cracked, layer by layer. Scott's confidence unraveled. The tension in the room grew sharp enough to slice through bone. When they left, my mother's whisper followed me like a shadow, "This isn't over." And she was right. The next morning, the storm began. When I came downstairs, my mother was already sitting at the breakfast table, drinking coffee she had not been offered, flipping through Grandma's old business ledgers like she already owned them. Scott was by the window whispering into the phone about restructuring and joint control. They didn't see me at first. I watched them like strangers who broke into my life wearing familiar faces. That afternoon, Grandma called her lawyer. She prepared documents. She gathered evidence. She planned something bold, something final. She told me we would invite them back for dinner. Let them think they've won, she said. Calm. Controlled. Powerful. Dinner came. They arrived hungry for control. They sat down ready to take everything. They believed they were the smartest people in the room. They were not. Because Grandma was not done. She was only beginning. And on that table, under those soft lights, with the smell of roasted garlic in the air, she was about to end everything they thought they controlled. And that. I felt it as soon as she lifted her chin and looked at them with that calm, sharp look she only used when she had already won the fight before it even began. The room felt tighter, like even the walls were leaning in to listen, like the house itself knew something bigger than all of us was about to unfold. I sat there with my hands in my lap, my heart beating too fast, but my face stayed still because Grandma had asked me to stay calm. She said quiet strength was louder than shouting, and I understood it better that night than ever before in my life. My mother sat across from me in her red dress, the color of warning, the color of control, the color she used when she wanted people to think she was stronger than she really was. Scott sat beside her, his tie loosened, his smile tight, bouncing his gaze between me and Grandma like he was waiting for the perfect moment to jump in and twist the whole conversation to his advantage. He always did that. He always used 100 words to say nothing honest. But that night, Grandma didn't give him room to breathe. She let the silence grow until it became uncomfortable, until it pressed on them the way they had pressed on me for years. The candles flickered between us, throwing shadows that danced across the table, and then Grandma finally spoke, her voice gentle but sharp enough to slice through lies. She told them she had reviewed every document, every ledger, every transfer they thought she would never discover. My mother tried to laugh it off at first, but her laugh cracked halfway through. Scott leaned forward to interrupt, but Grandma raised one finger, and somehow that single gesture froze him in place. She opened the silver folder she had placed beside her plate, and the sound of papers sliding against each other felt louder than thunder. She did not rush. She did not tremble. She moved like a woman who had spent her whole life fighting battles people did not know existed. And then she began laying document after document on the table. Bank statements. Emails. Transfers. Hidden accounts. Mortgage attempts under shell companies. Every piece of proof they thought would stay buried under their pretty stories and sweet promises. My mother's face started to drain of color, like the truth was pulling it away. Scott kept swallowing hard, trying to look calm, but his foot tapped under the table in panic. He knew. He knew they were caught, and he was trying to find an exit in a room with none left. When Grandma finished speaking, she let the silence sit heavy. You could almost hear the whole house holding its breath. My mother finally snapped, her voice high and sharp, accusing Grandma of twisting things, accusing me of taking sides, accusing everyone but herself. She always did that. She blamed the room when the mirror showed something she didn't want to accept. She stood from her chair and pointed at both of us like anger could fix what greed had broken. She said she was the rightful heir. She said she should have been the owner. She said I was too young and too soft and too sheltered to run anything real. But each word sounded less powerful than the one before it. She was losing ground, and she knew it. Scott tried to stand with her, but Grandma spoke one more sentence that changed everything. She said, "You were invited tonight for closure, not negotiation." My mother froze. Even Scott froze. Because that was the moment Grandma pulled out the final envelope, the one she had not mentioned to me beforehand. She slid it across the table. My mother reached for it like someone reaching for the last lifeline left in the world, but when she opened it, her whole body stiffened. Inside was the ownership amendment. Grandma had signed everything over to me fully, legally, permanently. There was nothing left for them to twist or negotiate or manipulate. It was done. And then Grandma spoke again, her voice soft but carrying the weight of decades. "You lost this long before Sophia was born. You lost this the day you chose appearance over responsibility." My mother crumbled. Not loudly. Not gracefully. She sagged into her chair like the truth had finally caught her. She tried to deny it again, but even she knew the words sounded weak. Scott started to raise his voice, but at that moment, Grandma placed yet another document on the table, a court order. Fraud. Embezzlement. Conspiracy. Charges already filed. Investigators already waiting outside the door. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief. She said it wasn't possible. She said Grandma wouldn't. She said no mother would do that to her own daughter. But Grandma's voice didn't shake. She said, "Being my daughter was a privilege you traded for greed." Scott looked like a man who had been shot without seeing the gun. He tried to speak, but the words never came. The knock on the door came next. Firm. Cold. Final. 2 officers stepped in gently, politely, like people who understood the difference between justice and cruelty. They didn't handcuff them dramatically. They didn't raise their voices. They just did their job, and sometimes that is the hardest truth to swallow, that justice can walk in quietly. Scott didn't fight. He simply stared at the floor and followed them. But my mother. She hesitated. She turned to me, her eyes full of hurt, anger, confusion, every emotion except accountability. She whispered, "You think this makes you strong? You'll regret this." But the whisper felt hollow, like a warning from someone who no longer remembered how to be powerful. When the door closed behind them, the house went still, still in a way I had never felt in that home before. Not empty. Not lonely. Clean. Quiet. Safe. It was like the noise of years had finally been swept out. I sank into my chair. My hands trembled. My breath trembled. My soul trembled. Grandma walked around the table and placed her hand over mine. Her hand felt warm. Steady. Real. She said, "You handled yourself better than I did at your age." I didn't feel strong. I felt shaken. I felt like the ground under me was new and soft and unpredictable. I asked her if Mom would ever forgive us. Grandma sighed. She said forgiveness is for people who admit their truth. She said my mother wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That night, I walked to the window and watched the police cars fade down the long gravel path. The red and blue lights painted the driveway like broken confetti. Scott sat in the back of one car, silent. My mother stood outside another, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her hands shaking. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt something deeper. A quiet ache for the family we could have been if pride had not eaten us alive. But there was no going back. Some bridges burn themselves. The next morning was strangely peaceful. The sunlight felt different, warmer, softer, like the house itself had exhaled. Grandma sat at the kitchen table sipping her coffee. She looked 10 years younger. I realized then that she had carried the weight of my mother's mistakes far longer than I ever knew. Dad came by that afternoon. He didn't ask questions. He didn't make speeches. He just placed a hand on Grandma's shoulder and said, "You did what needed to be done." When he looked at me, his eyes weren't sad. They were proud. I felt something inside me settle. Weeks passed. News spread. My mother tried to fight the charges, but the evidence was too clear. She blamed everyone but herself. She blamed Grandma. She blamed Scott. She blamed me. She blamed the world, but blame cannot rewrite truth. Scott disappeared from the state before the investigation could close. My mother stayed long enough to watch her name crumble in the business world she once worshipped. Slowly, painfully, she learned that reputation built on mirrors shatters the fastest. I graduated top of my architecture class. I took over the hotel. I rebuilt teams. I restructured what needed to be repaired. I stood in rooms where my mother once stood, but I carried none of her greed, none of her hunger, none of her noise. I carried Grandma's lessons. I carried discipline. I carried honesty. I carried the truth that legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you protect. The night of my graduation, Grandma and I sat on the rooftop of the hotel. She raised her glass and said, "To new foundations." I realized that I wasn't just running a business. I was rebuilding a life. But peace does not last forever. Not when family wounds run deep. And just when I thought everything had settled, a letter arrived that changed everything again. It came on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the world feels soft and the sunlight looks gentle, and you think trouble is far away. I was at the hotel office reviewing renovation plans when the front desk clerk walked in and handed me an envelope. No return address. No stamp. Someone had dropped it off in person. My stomach tightened before I even opened it because life has a way of whispering before it speaks. I broke the seal slowly, careful like I already sensed something delicate inside. And when I unfolded the paper, my hands stopped moving. It was my mother's handwriting. Not the angry handwriting. Not the rushed, sharp handwriting. This was slow. Neat. Thoughtful. The kind she used when she used to sign school forms or leave little notes on my lunchbox back when life was still simple. At first, I thought it was a trap. Or a demand. Or another attempt to guilt me back into the chaos she created, but it wasn't. It was something I did not expect. It was an apology. A real one. Her words were shaky, uneven, like she fought herself for every sentence. She said she knew she had hurt me. She said she knew she had betrayed Grandma. She said she understood now that she had built her identity on shadows instead of work. She admitted she let ambition swallow love. She admitted she had been unfair, cruel, blind. She said Scott had disappeared and left her to carry the consequences alone. She said she had lost everything, her position, her money, her reputation, but the thing that hurt her the most was losing me. And then she wrote something that pierced straight through me. She said she was proud of me. She said I had done what she never had the courage to do, choose integrity over comfort. My eyes burned reading that part because for years I thought she didn't see me at all. But buried in those shaky words, I felt something I had not felt from her in a long time, truth. I did not know how to respond. Part of me wanted to forgive her on the spot. Part of me wanted to tear the letter in half. Part of me wanted to drive to wherever she was and scream and cry and demand answers for every wound she left on me. But Grandma taught me something important: sometimes clarity takes time. Sometimes distance is the only way people learn. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time. The hotel hummed around me, busy, alive, full of the life that I was now responsible for protecting. For the first time, I realized I had grown. Not because I had inherited something, but because I had survived something. Because I had walked through a fire my mother created and came out not angry, not bitter, but steady. I took the letter to Grandma that evening. She was sitting in the garden, trimming her roses like she always did when she needed to think. I handed it to her. She read it slowly, her eyes softening in a way I had not seen since before everything fell apart. When she finished, she handed it back to me and said, "Your mother finally found her honesty. Pain will do that to a person." I asked Grandma what I should do. She didn't tell me to forgive her. She didn't tell me to forget. She said something much wiser. She said, "You don't owe her trust. But you owe yourself peace. So make the choice that brings you peace." And for the first time, I understood that forgiveness is not a gift you give someone else, it is freedom you give yourself. Weeks passed before I made my decision. I wrote my mother back. Not with hatred. Not with anger. Not with softness either. I wrote with truth. I told her I heard her. I told her I hoped she healed. I told her I did not hate her. But I also told her I needed time. I told her trust would take years to rebuild. Maybe a lifetime. She wrote back once more, only one line: "I understand." It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't a fresh start. But it was something. A small bridge where there used to be only fire. Life began to settle again. I focused on the hotel. I worked long days and quiet nights. I made decisions my mother never had the patience to learn. I built a team that believed in effort, not ego. Guests came from everywhere, and every time I walked through the lobby, I remembered Grandma's words: "Every building tells a story." And this building told mine. It told hers too. It told the truth that legacy is earned, not inherited. It told the truth that you can break a cycle without breaking yourself. One evening, months later, Grandma and I were on the rooftop again, watching the city lights shimmer like fallen stars. She held my hand, and for the first time, I felt like the future belonged to me, not because it was given, but because I had fought for it. She looked at me with that proud little smile and said, "You did it, Sophia. You rebuilt the family's name without losing your own." I leaned my head on her shoulder and finally exhaled the breath I had been holding for years. I realized then that my inheritance was never the hotel. It was strength, clarity, wisdom, boundaries, and peace. And now, when people walk through the hotel doors and see my name in gold above the entrance, they think it came from luck or privilege. They think it came easy. They think it came clean. But the truth is written somewhere deeper, written in court documents, in tears, in broken conversations, in letters filled with shaky apologies. The truth is that I earned my place by standing firm when my own family tried to shake me. I earned it by choosing honesty over comfort. I earned it by choosing peace over chaos. And if someone out there watching this has ever had to choose between family and self-respect, then they know this feeling too. They know that sometimes the most important story you ever write is the one where you finally say, "No more." So this is my ending. Not a loud one. Not a perfect one. But a real one. A quiet victory built on truth. A new foundation built on strength. And a life that finally feels like mine. And if you're still here, thank you for watching my story. If you have ever fought for your peace, you are not alone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. It helps the channel grow and lets me share more stories with you.